Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about, understanding that there really isn't a hypertrophy rep range, right? People have gotten big and jacked using a wide variety of rep ranges over the years. Again, a lot of the science isn't always the best on this. Again, there's problems with exercise science studies. This is stuff I've discussed quite a bit lately, but it doesn't mean that we should discount all of it completely by any means. That would not be reasonable. But even a lot of the data out there has kind of showed, yeah, people gain muscle in most rep ranges. Now there can be downsides to different rep ranges, right? There can be downsides, as in maybe you don't get as much neural drive from some, so you won't get as much strength carryover. There's the case of, if reps just get too high, sometimes we just create endless amounts of neural fatigue, really. It's actually quite the opposite of what people think. Heavy lifting doesn't actually cause that much neural fatigue. It's more structural in your body. So that's kind of the balancing act, really, because full range of motion exercises in which we create fatigue, we train hard, and sets are taken fairly close to failure. In some cases to failure, but very close to it. In other words, very hard, high quality sets in which we do a lot of work, okay? In which we work hard, that we train through effective ranges of motion. That is what is going to stimulate growth. Okay, and we need to be clear on here. The evidence for that, both in the real world and in the labs, pretty much overwhelming. The downside with certain rep ranges is that they can create certain types of fatigue that accumulate and become problems. Okay, that's why there's any balancing act or discussion here at all. Okay, because people have gotten really jacked on 5 and 6 rep sets. There have been people who've gotten really jacked on 15 to 20 rep sets. Okay, and some exercises it makes sense. I would look at someone and say, have you ever seen someone who's at a high body weight who cranks out sets of 20 on pull-ups who doesn't have a massive back? Right? Right. So we know the higher reps work. Ever seen anybody who can do weighted pull-ups for full range of motion with over 100 pounds who doesn't have a jacked back? Of course. Right? Some of this should be common sense in your observations. But here's the problem we run into. It just has to do with the type of fatigue that they accumulate. In other words, if we do too much really heavy work, five or lower reps, what happens? Beats our body up, beats our joints up, beats our bones up a little bit. We just start to hurt. We start to hurt. And I don't mean soreness. I don't mean DOMS. I'm talking, maybe your joints start to hurt. Shoulders start to hurt. Your knees might start to hurt. Hips hurt. Because we're just loading so much weight. And keeping in mind that weight is relative to what you're capable of doing and what your structure and musculature can support. Okay? So again, you beat really heavy work into the ground all the time, your body's going to start to hurt. Okay? It's understood. If we do too much really high rep work, it's just grueling and fatiguing and exhausting, and it may not be even doing more set for set than just using more moderate reps. So this is kind of why I tend to push people in the direction of we should have a balance of rep ranges or more the moderate rep range. What I mean, like that 8 to 12, that old hypertrophy rep range that people talked about, what is not because it turned out to be better for hypertrophy. It's that the workloads just tended to be a little more manageable, right? It's very straightforward, isn't it? The workloads are more manageable. In other words, the sets are not grueling. They're not just making you tired and fatigued to where you just feel drained like we can when we start doing a bunch of 20 or 25 rep sets, right? It gets grueling, absolutely grueling. And I think particularly with our big exercises, okay? It's one thing with small movements. You can get away with it with curls and stuff. But, bigger exercises where we're working a lot of muscles, it's just absolutely grueling. I mean, 10s can be hard enough on some big movements like legs and things. It's just grueling. And then you feel drained and fatigued when you do too much of it. All right, so that's one end of the spectrum. The other end is when we start going to too much heavy work. We can get away with a few sets of really heavy stuff every week. We can get away with it just fine. Works great. All right. But then what? We do too much of it. We start to really hurt. We start to hurt a lot, in fact. All right? We can start to hurt a whole lot if we're not careful. So again, we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of that and step back and say, okay, I can't handle that much of it before my body just starts to hurt. And then the same thing, we're not necessarily gaining more muscle more quickly. And people need to realize gaining muscle should generally be your goal. I don't care whether you're trying to get stronger for strength or for sports. Okay? Gaining muscle is the biggest factor for improving our 1 rep maxes. Okay? And this is understood. There's so much evidence for this that it's overwhelming. All right, same thing. Someone says, well, I want better body composition. I want to look better. I want to have a better metabolism, burn fat better. Well, gaining muscle will help you do that. In other words, the more muscle you have, the easier it is to burn through calories, to burn through body fat, to have better body composition. Okay, this is understood. So it should generally be our goals. And we want to be clear there. People who are like, well, I'm trying to get bigger. I'm not trying to get that big. It's like you're never going to do that naturally. So quit worrying about that. Okay? People who say that sort of nonsense, then when they actually do try to get quote unquote too big, then they realize they can't actually do it. But this person over here did it. I'm like, yeah, they used high doses of stuff for 5 years straight. You're not doing that. Okay, sorry, but I thought they were natural, well, I'm sorry you got tricked. But the fact is you're not going to get quote unquote too big. You're not going to get too big for your sport. You're probably not going to get too big for you to be concerned about it. It really shouldn't be an issue. Gaining muscle is beneficial for almost every goal that you have. Okay? Gaining muscle makes you a better marathon runner. It helps you be leaner. It makes you stronger. Right? Absolutely. So come back over to that point. What do I think is realistically possibly the best solution? To either stick with the mostly moderate reps or to train through a variety of rep ranges so you don't accrue too much of the fatigues that you're worried about, okay, of any given type. That's a good way to balance things. And I don't think you always necessarily need to periodize it. You can run it in phases just so that you change fatigue around. That's an option. Or you can just do them all in the same training weeks. Right? You can have some heavier, medium, and light stuff. You can even do them in the same workouts. But I think that is also a viable solution to the problem of that. Okay? All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.